Hello, I'm Carolyn Baker, co-author with Guy McPherson of Extinction Dialogs, How to Live with Death in Mind. This is a book that, occurred to Guy and I to write last year, approximately in the month of April. Guy, do you want to say a little bit about what got us on the road to writing this?
Yes, as I recall, and it was April 2014, and so I might be a little fuzzy on the details, but I seem to recall I was on a speaking tour in the northeastern United States and in Canada. My cell phone doesn't work outside of the country, but when I came back into the United States from Canada, I had a couple of messages. One of them was from Andrew Harvey. And Andrew Harvey, I then talked to him on the phone, and he suggested that I get together with you and write a book. And maybe it could be a book that talked about the evidence concerning abrupt climate change and also how we react to that. So that was the impetus and the inspiration. Just a few days later, maybe even 2 days later, Michael C. Rupert took his own life, and that added a little bit of impetus for us, in particular as evidenced by the subtitle, How to Live with Death in Mind.
Yes, I remember that well, and I'm very glad that we were able to do this together, and I'm also amazed at the ease with which we did it. It seemed like everything just came together, and we sort of cranked it out in about 6 weeks, as I recall.
Yeah, it was a very rapid process, and the fact that we treated it as a dialogue, Extinction Dialogs, was particularly motivating, I guess, because sometimes you suffer a little writer's block. You can't quite figure out what direction you're going to head. But it's easy if somebody else just wrote 6 paragraphs and dumped them in your email inbox. And, oh, I can respond to that. That reminds me I should talk about this or that.
Yeah, that made it much easier.
Mhm.
Well, do you have any favorite passages from the book that you'd like to share?
Yes. Yes, I'm going to read just a few paragraphs from toward the end of the book under the category Living and Dying Well, and you inspired this passage by writing in a previous paragraph, we should probably talk about what living well means from both our perspectives. And so my response to that is, I recommend allowing yourself to feel the emptiness wash over you. Get off your smartphone, put aside all your digital toys, and immerse yourself in the horrors of being alone. We're alone. It's tragic. The universe doesn't care about us as a species, much less about us as individuals. Feel the pain of insignificance, and then perhaps you can appreciate the joys of being here at all against overwhelming odds. And then towards the end of that same section, after I talk a little bit about action as the antidote to despair and a few other tidbits, I point out that accepting our mortality as a gift is hardly a new idea. Social critic Jonathan Swift poignantly described the horrors of immortality in his 1726 book, Gulliver's Travels. Many other writers have subsequently joined the fray. Contemporary American poet Mary Oliver points out, quote, "Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this, too, was a gift." Our own death is a gift for several reasons, most notably because it means we get to live. Let's live. In the spirit of seizing the moment, let's live now. In the spirit of awareness and in recognition of this moment, let's live here now.
Yeah, I'd like to read a passage from the introduction of our book. I mentioned a man named John O'Donohue who actually left us in 2008 at the age of 52. And in the introduction, we write, "The Irish poet, scholar, and author was a child of the indigenous Celtic tradition, which, like so many other earth-based traditions, grasps on a cellular level that death is a part of life. And in the same tradition, storyteller and mythologist Michael Meade often states that life is fatal, no one gets out of here alive." And for most members of this culture, literal death is some far-off exigency that is only possible it's only a concept in people's mind, and one that they hope to keep as much distance from as possible. And yet, in a death-phobic culture, individuals do not realize that symbolic deaths are really kind of preparation for and extensions of the big one. And of this, John O'Donohue writes, In a certain sense, the meeting of your own death in the daily forms of failure, pathos, negativity, fear, or destructiveness are actually opportunities to transfigure your ego. Do you have anything else you'd like to read from the book, Guy, or share just your thoughts?
Well, I love to have conversation with you and talk about this particular topic. I'm not going to read anymore. I was just particularly inspired by this project, and I think that inspiration shines through in the swiftness with which we wrote the book, in the commitment we had to it, and that we continue to have to talking about these ideas.
And, one of the most useful things that both of us have discovered, even before writing this book, is the power of conscious grieving in order to bring us to acceptance of our predicament. We've both discovered that it liberates us on many levels and paradoxically enhances our capacity to experience joy and beauty. It also deepens our connection with the earth and with other human beings who are grieving with us. And so for this reason, I noticed that both of us are doing and offering grief workshops in various places to facilitate this process in a safe and supportive way. On page 208 of the book, I quote,
Sorry.
on page 208 of the book, I quote Canadian author, storyteller, and hospice worker Stephen Jenkinson, who's often called the grief walker. And he says, to see what you love dying and to continue to love it when it's not going to last, that in itself is an act of love. And so for me, this encapsulates what we've articulated in the book. We see what is dying and we love it anyway, and not just anyway, but because it is dying. When you know you're losing a being that you love, your life becomes all about loving that person with all your heart and soul and mind and breath.
Right, and we're such a grief-denying, death-denying culture that it would be easy for us to capitulate to that culture and never think about, much less write about and speak about these topics. But, as we all know, birth is lethal. Nobody gets out alive, and death obviously is a part of life, as pointed out by Jonathan Swift so many years ago. So, embracing our own mortality means, at least for me and for many other people I know, experiencing true joy, immersing ourselves in the real world, the real natural world, and as a consequence, living in light of the fact that nobody gets out alive.
Yeah, and one of the most important ways that we can love our dying planet and our dying species is to live passionately in this time of extinction. As we've stated earlier in our book, that means living a life of service, creating joy and beauty at every possible opportunity, and unleashing our creativity in spite of our culturally programmed messages about about our creativity not being good enough. And one of the most profound ways to live passionately, I think, is to fall deeply in love with the earth, for the first time, perhaps, or the second time, or as often as we can. And I didn't mention this in the book, but there's an African proverb that says, when death comes, may it find you fully alive. I conclude the book by saying, for me, the absolute bottom line is what I believe we came here to do. Even beyond the service, joy, beauty, and creativity we can offer, fundamentally, we are here to experience death and rebirth, the death of who we think we are, so that who we are in our core, that is our sacred self, may be born. And even if there were no catastrophic climate change or near-term extinction breathing down our necks, I believe this is our mission.
Well, sure. And one of the lines I use quite regularly is passionately pursue a life of excellence. And I think that's valid advice, regardless of how long we have. And by the way, regardless of how long we have, it's not very long. Even if we live to be 100, that's not exactly forever. When we leave, we're going to leave with a few memories behind. And people ask me all the time, what do you mean, pursue a life of excellence? I don't understand what that means. And it means different things for different people, obviously. For me, the question goes back to Socrates, and Socrates spent his entire life trying to define what it means to pursue excellence. And he attempted to respond to that primary issue by repeatedly asking in various forms only 6 questions. What is courage? What is good? What is justice? What is moderation? What is piety? What is virtue? Those 6 questions form the core of Socrates' pursuit of excellence, as they do for me.
Yeah, and I think it's really important when we talk about a life of excellence to explain, just as you just did, what that actually means, as opposed to what this culture teaches us about excellence. Because the culture teaches us that excellence is synonymous somehow with perfection. And, as we go deeply into this journey within ourselves that I think anyone who awakens to near-term extinction must make, we realize that we're imperfect human beings and that that's really okay, and that really from that imperfection, so-called, can come great joy and beauty and compassion and creativity.
Right, and words matter. People often assign me the line, live a life of excellence. And I've never said such a thing. I think it's ridiculous, because I think we're incapable of living a life of excellence. I think we're perfectly capable of pursuing a life of excellence, and that pursuit is an idealistic one that probably cannot be achieved. Extinction Dialogs, How to Live with Death in Mind, with Carolyn Baker and me, is available from Tayen Lane Publishing. That's Tayen Lane Publishing. And I very much appreciate, Carolyn, the opportunity to work with you on this book. It was a rapid, inspiring conversation, which actually leads to the name Extinction Dialogs. We actually had a dialogue. So thank you for the opportunity to work with you on this book.
Well, thank you, Guy. People can also order the book through their local bookstore or in Amazon, whichever they prefer. And I'm just so honored to be able to have had this dialogue with you. And I really look forward to interviewing with you and, future projects and working together, because we are truly on the same wavelength. And I really appreciate having you in my life.
Yes, as do I you. So let's try to make those events happen increasingly in our future.
Okay.